Tales of the Incandescent episode number 4, Blackpoint Number 5. The bright light faded, revealing a vast, eerie castle under the night sky. X found herself alone in the front courtyard, surrounded by an unsettling silence broken only by a strange, distant melody. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of Y or the mysterious light bulb. "Why?" she called out, her voice echoing off the stone walls. She took a few tentative steps forward, her gaze sweeping across the empty expanse. "Why, where are you?" she cried out louder, her concern growing with each passing moment. X hugged herself against the chill of the low, ominous winds that whistled through the courtyard. The green moss clinging to the ancient stone walls seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Ornate balconies and grotesque gargoyles loomed overhead, while winding stone steps led up to multiple towers. "Where am I?" X whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the wind. Seeking answers, X made her way into the mid-tower. The windowless archways offered little comfort, but she approached one, gazing out at the vast ocean that stretched beyond the castle's domain. "What is this place?" she wondered aloud, her voice filled with a mix of awe and trepidation. Leaving the mid-tower, X descended a wide, long set of stone stairs. From this elevated position, she had a sweeping view of the castle courtyards below. At the bottom, she paused, taking in her surroundings once more before venturing into a larger courtyard. This new area was far more expansive than the first, with 2 long columns of holly trees standing as silent sentinels. And there, amidst the greenery, stood the light bulb. X approached it cautiously, her eyes fixed on the peculiar object. "Well, I found the light bulb," she mused. "But where is the strange skinny man?" As X drew closer to the light bulb, she found herself captivated by its intricate design. Her fingers traced the gorgeous etchings on its base, studying every detail with intense curiosity. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke the silence. "The etchings on the base of the bulb are gorgeous, aren't they?" X spun around, her face lighting up with relief and joy. "Why?" she exclaimed. The tall, slender man stood before her, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. He offered a nod and a wave as he closed the distance between them. X's relief quickly gave way to a barrage of questions. "Where are we? This castle is huge, and the ocean surrounding it is even larger. How is it that we keep transporting like this?" Y's lips curled into a slight smirk. "You sure do ask a lot of questions," he remarked. "This is Castle Avalon, home of the sleeping Titania and Oberon." "Titania and Oberon?" X echoed, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Yes, Queen and King of the Fairies," Y explained matter-of-factly. X nodded slowly, processing this information. "I see. And an answer to my other question?" "What other question?" Y asked, feigning ignorance. "How did we get here?" X pressed, her patience wearing thin. Y threw up his hands in a gesture of mock helplessness as he walked away, following the wire connected to the light bulb. Present day, present time, past tense, future prediction. What's the difference when it's all out on paper anyway? Or a screen? "Excuse me?" X called after him, thoroughly confused by his cryptic response. Y bent down to examine where the wire was simply plugged into a stone in the wall. "Never mind," he said, brushing off her confusion. "Come on, get ready, we've got a good one today." X's frustration was evident in her voice. "You will answer my questions soon, strange skinny man?" As Y unplugged the wire, causing the bulb to start glowing, he called back. Yes, but first, entertainment." He continued with enthusiasm. "Tonight we have a story based on an old Polish legend about a young man named William Lampart. Please enjoy, my dear." "I've asked you not to call me that," X reminded him, her tone stern. "Right, sorry, turn of phrase," Y apologized quickly. As the bright light began to glow once more, signaling the start of their next adventure, X couldn't help but wonder what strange tale awaited them in the world of William Lampart.
Will and the Wyrm, Illumination Number 5. As the bright light of the bulb faded, a foggy morning revealed itself over the rolling Polish hills, The sound of distant church bells echoed across a large lake, its surface shrouded in mist. Into this tranquil scene walked William Lampart, a 16-year-old boy with short brown hair and average features. He wore suspenders and carried a fishing pole over his shoulder, whistling a cheerful tune as he made his way down to the lake. William's eyes scanned the shoreline until they landed on a sturdy rock nestled under a tree at the water's edge. With a satisfied nod, he settled onto his chosen spot and began preparing his fishing pole. The peaceful atmosphere enveloped him as he cast his line into the still waters, the gentle lapping of waves against the shore providing a soothing backdrop to the fading church bells. As William focused intently on his line, a sudden cackle shattered the silence. "You won't catch anything while the church bells are playing." The voice, shrill and mocking, came from behind him. Startled, William whirled around to find himself face to face with a witch. Her green skin glowed eerily in the morning light, and her black gown and pointed hat stood in stark contrast to the misty landscape. Her nose, long and crooked, nearly touched William's as she leaned in, cackling with unbridled glee. "Don't you know anything, boy?" She wheezed between fits of laughter, clutching her sides as if this were the most hilarious thing she'd ever encountered. William's initial shock gave way to annoyance. He swung his arm at her, attempting to shoo her away like an annoying insect. "Leave me be, hag!" he snapped, turning his attention back to the lake. The witch, however, was not so easily deterred. Her laughter continued, echoing across the water. Ignoring her proved futile as she leaned over his shoulder, her breath hot on his ear. The church bells had fallen silent now, leaving only the sound of her ragged breathing and occasional giggles. "Can I help you?" William asked, his patience wearing thin. The witch's grin widened, revealing a set of yellowed, crooked teeth. For a moment she said nothing, building the tension. Then, without warning, she let loose another ear-splitting cackle directly into William's ear. Startled, William dropped his pole. He batted his arms wildly around him, as if fending off a swarm of horseflies. The witch jumped back, her laughter intensifying at his frantic movements. "I said leave me be, hag!" William shouted, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Bending down to retrieve his fallen pole, William took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. He returned to his fishing, determined to ignore the unwelcome visitor. The witch, however, had other plans. She stood silently for a moment, her eyes fixed on the young fisherman. Then, in a voice dripping with foreboding, she spoke. "You'll have no luck on this day, boy." With one final cackle, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the foggy, rolling hills. William didn't bother to watch her go, focusing instead on his fishing. As the morning wore on, the fog thickened, settling heavily on the lake's surface. What had once seemed peaceful now took on an eerie quality. William found himself glancing nervously at the mist-shrouded trees surrounding him. Try as he might to concentrate on his fishing, he couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that crept over him. His heart began to race, and he found it increasingly difficult to sit still. He bit his lip, forcing himself to stare at his fishing line, but his eyes kept darting back and forth, scanning the oppressive fog for any sign of movement. Just as the tension became almost unbearable, William felt a sudden tug on his line. Excitement momentarily overcame his fear as he pulled and reeled with all his might. The line went taut, and then, With a mighty splash, his catch broke the surface of the water. What emerged, however, was no ordinary fish. Attached to William's hook was a long red worm with the head of an ugly, fetal human baby. 2 small devil horns protruded from its misshapen skull. The creature gasped for air, its cheek pierced by the fishing hook as it wiggled frantically. William trembled as he reeled in this monstrous catch, his mind reeling at the impossible sight before him. Yet, as the initial shock subsided, a strange calm settled over him. With steady hands, he finished reeling in the creature until it dangled before his face at the end of his pole. The boy and the monster regarded each other in silence. Its eyelids fluttered open and closed, revealing glossy black orbs where eyes should be. Tiny flippers and gills lined its elongated body, giving it an appearance somewhere between fish and nightmare. "You caught the devil." The witch's voice, suddenly at his side, made William jump. He turned to find her grinning widely, her eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and something darker, more knowing. Before William could respond, the witch opened her mouth wide and cackled, the sound even more terrifying than before. William stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The fish-like creature let out an agonized scream as it swung on the hook, the movement causing it even more pain. "I told you, boy! I tried to warn you!" the witch crowed, her voice a mix of glee and admonishment. "No good can come from skipping church on Sunday!" Her laughter grew more hysterical, filling the air around them. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The witch's face grew serious, her long, skinny green finger pointing accusingly at William. "You caught the devil," she said, her voice low and ominous. "Now what are you going to do with him?" William, still trembling, struggled to find his voice. How should I know?" he finally managed to stammer out. The witch's demeanor changed once again, her voice taking on an almost businesslike tone. "Follow me, boy," she commanded. Despite his fear and confusion, William found himself nodding. He glanced nervously at the terrifying creature still dangling from his fishing line, then back at the witch. With no other apparent option, he fell in to step behind her as she led him away from the lake. They travelled through a thickly wooded trail, the fog seeming to part before them, only to close in again once they had passed. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, they emerged into a small clearing. At its centre stood an old stone well. The witch, her earlier solemnity forgotten, ran up to the well with childlike glee. She circled it, patting her hands on the rim and smiling widely. "Here! Here!" she cried, her voice filled with excitement. William looked from the creature at the end of his fishing pole to the well and back again, uncertainty etched on his face. "Toss the beast in here," the witch instructed, punctuating her command with another bout of cackling. Slowly, William approached the well. He took one last look at the horrible creature dangling from his pole. Its black, glossy eyes seemed to stare directly into his soul as it gasped and writhed. The witch appeared at William's shoulder, her grin wide and unsettling. "Drop it in, boy," she whispered in his ear. William nodded, steeling himself for what he was about to do. With his free hand, he grasped the worm-like devil, wincing as it screamed and bled at his touch. Taking a deep breath, he released it over the well. The creature's agonized scream echoed off the stone walls as it fell, its body whipping and writhing as it disappeared into the inky blackness below. William and the witch peered down into the depths, watching until the last glimmer of its red scales vanished from sight. As soon as the creature disappeared, the witch began to clap and dance around the well, her voice rising in a sing-song taunt. "The boy who caught the devil! The boy who caught the devil! The boy who caught the devil!" William stood frozen at the well's edge, his mind struggling to process what had just occurred. A light rain began to fall, its soft patter a stark contrast to the surreal scene that had just unfolded. The witch's dance came to an abrupt halt. She rushed to William's side, placing both her hands on one of his shoulders and leaning in close. Now, here is what you must do, boy," she whispered urgently. "Are you listening to me?" I am," William replied, his voice barely audible. "Good," the witch continued, her tone serious. "Now every day, and I mean every day, you must return to this well, and when you come, you must bring with you both string and sealing wax. Do you understand what I am saying, boy? String and sealing wax you will need every day, and you will throw these things into the well. You will drop them in, both the string." She waved an open palm nuttering down the well. "And the sealing wax. Every day." William nodded, trying to process this strange instruction. He attempted to pull away from the witch's grasp, uncomfortable with her proximity. "Good," she said again, finally releasing his shoulder. William stumbled slightly, putting some distance between them, while keeping a wary eye on both the witch and the well. The witch's serious demeanour vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She began to cackle once more, her laughter growing in intensity with each passing moment. William continued to back away, his walk turning into a fast pace, and finally breaking into a full run as the sound of the witch's manic laughter echoed through the woods behind him. That evening, William sat at the kitchen table with his parents, the events of the morning weighing heavily on his mind. His father, a gruff, middle-aged man with big, calloused hands and dirty farm clothes, sat across from him. His mother, an old-fashioned woman in an apron and bonnet, completed the family trio. The meal progressed in silence, the only sounds the clinking of utensils against plates. Finally, his father broke the silence. "You skipped church again today." William looked up from his plate, nervousness evident in his eyes. His mother fixed him with a scornful gaze as she continued to chew her food. "I just thought I could catch more fish if I spent the morning fishing, instead of sitting in church, you know," William offered weakly. His father said nothing for a moment, simply pondering his son's words as he took another bite of his food. William, unsure what to do, followed suit. "You gotta go to church, William," his father finally said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm sorry, father," William replied, glancing at his mother for support. "Don't look at your mom," his father admonished sharply. William's eyes snapped back to his father, who held his gaze for a moment before taking another large bite of food. As he chewed, he spoke again. "Why don't you come with me outside, William?" "All right," William agreed, starting to rise from his chair. "When you're done eating," his father added, taking another bite. William sat back down with a quiet, "Okay." "Silly kid," his father muttered around his mouthful of food. Once the meal was finished, William followed his father outside. The older man was already splitting wood when William approached, watching his father's rhythmic movements. Finishing the log he was working on, William's father wiped the sweat from his forehead and turned to face his son. You enjoy the profession you've chosen to take up a lot, don't you, son? He asked, his tone unreadable. I do. In all honesty, very much, William replied. I'm sorry about church, though, Father. I will go tomorrow. His father glanced around, ensuring they were alone before continuing. When he looked back at William, a creepy, toothy grin spread across his face, revealing his busted and yellowed teeth. Son, he began, slamming his hand down hard on William's back. All men have a dragon inside them, one that would plough through the very heavens and earths if it meant getting to where it wants to go, like some sort of demon, an angel fallen from heaven, one of the Hydra's many, many heads. It lurks inside all men, that is, all humans, I mean to say. You understand? William nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely sure he did understand. That dragon, that great beast, his father continued, it can either run loose, hopelessly and destructively without purpose, only random, unformulated ambition driving it, or... He paused for effect, raising a proud fist in the air. Or a man can take up his sword, and he can use it to tame, shackle, and harness the beast. As his father's words faded into the night, replaced by the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, William found himself pondering their meaning. Little did he know how prophetic those words would prove to be. That night, as William slept peacefully in his bed, a vivid dream took hold of him. In the depths of a dark well, he could hear the sound of a heartbeat growing closer and louder. Before his eyes materialized an undulating mass of thick, red, scaly snake coils, slithering and winding around themselves in an endless, hypnotic dance. William woke with a start, his eyes bursting open as he found himself drenched in a cold sweat, his heart racing in his chest. The memory of the dream clung to him, its imagery burning in his mind's eye. As dawn broke, William set out once again, this time without his fishing pole. Instead, he clutched a length of string and a sealing wax candle, items he'd procured in secret the previous evening. His path diverged from his usual route to the lake, leading him instead up a different trail. When he arrived at the well, William approached it with a mix of trepidation and determination. He peered down into the dark, silent abyss, then set the string and candle on the well's rim. From his pocket, he produced an old-fashioned matchbox and struck a match, using it to light the candle. After extinguishing the match and grinding it underfoot, William took out a spool of fishing line. He carefully burned off a length of it, using the candle flame, then held both the string and the lit candle over the well. Tipping the candle, he let the hot wax run down the string as he released it, watching as it spiraled out of sight into the darkness below. William stood there for a long moment, staring into the depths of the well. The air around him seemed to grow heavy, charged with an unseen energy. Just as the tension became almost unbearable, the skies opened up and rain began to pour down in heavy sheets. Startled by the sudden downpour, William turned and ran, leaving the well and its mysteries behind him. In the days that followed, William fell into a routine. He attended church with his family, emerging from the building with a smile on his face. He exchanged warm greetings with his parents, chatted amiably with a pretty young girl, and even shared a friendly moment with the priest, who patted him on the back as they shook hands. His fishing, too, seemed to have taken a turn for the better. One afternoon found him by the lake, 3 full buckets of fish at his side, yet still he cast his line with merry anticipation, admiring the beautiful day around him. But As successful as his fishing had become, it was not the lake where William's true interest lay. Each day, without fail, he made his way to the well, string and sealing wax in hand. On this particular day, he approached with his 3 buckets of fish, setting them down in the grass surrounding the well. Leaning over the stone rim, William whistled down into the depths. Then, with a determined set to his jaw, he lifted one of the buckets and upended it, sending a cascade of fish tumbling into the darkness below. The sound of their bodies hitting the water far below echoed up to him, a dull splash that seemed to go on far longer than it should have. Keeping the now empty bucket in hand, William gathered up his string and sealing wax candle and headed off into the woods, whistling a merry tune. As he disappeared from view, a low, rumbling grumble echoed from deep within the well. Later that evening, the Lampart family gathered around their kitchen table for dinner. William's father wore a proud expression, mirrored by his son's confident demeanour. "Fishing seems to be going good for you, huh, son?" William's father asked, his eyes twinkling with pride. William finished chewing his mouthful before responding with a self-assured smile. "Very good." His father let out a hearty laugh, spraying bits of food as he spoke. "You know what they say, when a man harnesses the powers of hell, he's got the powers of creation at his fingertips." "Harrison!" William's mother exclaimed, scandalized by her husband's words. "Sorry, I misquoted some Freemason or something." His father backpedaled, though the twinkle in his eye suggested he wasn't sorry at all. William's eyes widened, his mouth agape as he stared at his father. His mother's suspicious gaze zeroed in on her son. "You keep going to church, you hear, boy?" "I am. I love church," William protested, taking another bite of food. As he chewed, he muttered under his breath, "Veronica's there." "William Lampart!" His mother gasped, appalled by her son's behaviour. His father, on the other hand, found the whole exchange hilarious and continued to laugh uproariously. William's mother looked from her son to her husband, shock evident on her face. "I swear, are you all possessed tonight or something?" A devilish grin spread across William's face as he took another bite of food, pointedly avoiding his mother's gaze. His father kept laughing, pausing only to take a large swig from his cup before resuming his mirth. Eventually, William's mother shook her head and let out a small chuckle, returning to her meal. Through the window the wind could be heard whistling ominously, a stark contrast to the jovial atmosphere within. As night fell over the village, an unseen menace prowled the fields. Goats and sheep scattered in terror, their frightened bleats piercing the darkness. A hazy silhouette, reminiscent of a T-Rex without its lower body, moved through the shadows, sending waves of panic through the helpless animals. The following day, William made his way through a densely foggy, wooded trail. The path was cramped and eerie, lined with thorny, dark foliage, reminiscent of the old Sleeping Beauty movie. Despite the ominous surroundings, William walked with confidence, the sealing candle clutched in his hand. Suddenly, the witch sprang out from behind a gnarled tree, blocking William's path. She pointed a bony finger at him, cackling madly. "Begone, hag!" William shouted, sweeping his arm in front of him as if to brush her aside. The witch stepped back a few paces, but continued to point and laugh even harder. "You caught the devil! You caught the devil! You caught the devil!" she chanted gleefully. "I said begone, hag! I know what I'm doing!" William declared, shoving past her and continuing down the path as her manic laughter echoed through the woods. As William approached the well, a sense of dread began to build within him. He leaned over the edge, peering into the depths below. Horror spread across his face as he stumbled backward, collapsing onto the grass and scrambling away on his back. A low growl emanated from the well, accompanied by the sound of a human heartbeat. William, trembling and out of breath, fled to the safety of the lake. He ran to his favourite fishing spot, collapsing against the sturdy rock beneath the old tree. Gasping for air, he rolled onto his back, trying to calm himself as he took in the peaceful surroundings. Later that afternoon, William arrived at church long after the service had ended. Everyone was already filing out, and all eyes turned to him, noting his dishevelled and sweaty appearance. Embarrassment and shame washed over him, especially when he caught the eye of the pretty girl he'd been talking to before. But it was his mother's disappointed gaze that cut him deepest. Phew. That evening, dinner at the Lampart household was a sombre affair. William ate in silence, his shoulders slumped and his head bowed low over his plate. He took small, slow bites, avoiding eye contact with his family. Finally, his father broke the silence. They were talking about missing livestock today at church. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a violent gust of wind shattered the kitchen window. William's mother screamed as his father tried to shield his family from the shower of glass that rained down upon the dinner table. As night fell once more, the village fields were shrouded in darkness. The wind howled through the trees, lending an ominous air to every branch and leaf. A group of cattle huddled together, sensing the danger that lurked in the shadows. Suddenly, a tortured moo rang out, followed by the sound of panicked animals fleeing and the sickening noise of a violent beast tearing into its prey. Meanwhile, at the foggy lake, the witch stood by William's usual fishing spot, her expression uncharacteristically concerned. She bit her lower lip, her brow furrowed as she gazed out over the water teeming with fish. Steam rose ominously from the well in the distance, a harbinger of the chaos to come. In his bedroom, William tossed and turned, trapped in the throes of a nightmare. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he wrestled with unseen terrors. A shadowy figure lurked in the corner of the room, its presence unnoticed by the sleeping boy. The sound of a human heartbeat filled the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Suddenly, a dark shape loomed over William's bed. His eyes snapped open to find the witch standing over him, her face a mask of anger in the dim light. Her yellow, crooked teeth gleamed as she grinned down at him. "What do you want? Why are you here, hag?" William cried, sitting up in bed and trembling. The witch placed her hand on William's stomach, leaning in closer. Her grin faded, replaced by a stern, serious expression. "To help," she said simply. Relief washed over William's face, though fear and shock still lingered in his eyes. The witch glanced over her shoulder at the door before continuing. "Bring your father to the lake and have him catch as many fish as he possibly can, tonight. Have him do this right now on this very night. You will." "What?" William exclaimed. "I can't make my father get up and go fishing in the middle of the night. He isn't even a fisherman. And what for? How will that help?" The witch cackled madly, her laughter echoing through the small room. As William tried to silence her, she abruptly stopped and fixed him with a stern gaze. "Then I'll bewitch the poor bastard," she declared before resuming her manic laughter. "Bewitch him! I can't let you bewitch my own father! Are you mad?" William protested, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. The witch's laughter grew even louder and more hysterical. "Let's just say this, boy," she wheezed between cackles. "You're the one who's been doing the bewitching, not me." With those cryptic words hanging in the air, William knew that the time had come to face the consequences of his actions. The beast he had unleashed was growing beyond his control, and now he would have to summon all his courage and wit to set things right. As the witch's laughter faded into the night, William steeled himself for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that the fate of his family and the entire village now rested in his hands. Determined to face the consequences of his actions, William strode purposefully towards the well. His shoulders were straight, his posture tall and fearless, as he approached the source of his troubles. "Hey!" William called out, his voice carrying on the night air. Silence answered him, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Undeterred, William tried again. "Hey! Do you like the fish I bring you?" Still, only the wind responded. William's confidence grew with each moment of silence. "You're probably hungry," he shouted into the well. "You should come out and let me take you to where the fish are. I know you can't go there without me." A low, deep grumble emanated from the depths of the well. Thick red steam began to billow forth, growing denser by the second. Suddenly, with a great roar, the devil dragon emerged. Its form was terrifying to behold, red scales glinting in the moonlight, long devil horns crowning an elongated face that was part devil, part dragon. Its massive jaws gaped open, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. A long, spaded tongue whipped back and forth like a wild snake, emerging from an even larger serpent's mouth. The beast coiled in the air, towering over William as it looked down at him. Their eyes locked, and William stood his ground, unafraid. The monster opened its mouth, releasing a low hiss accompanied by more billowing red smoke. "I am your shepherd beast," William declared boldly. "Follow me." Meanwhile, at the foggy lake, William's father stood alone in the middle of the night, fishing rod in hand. His eyes were glazed over, his movements mechanical, clearly under some sort of trance. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the chirping of crickets. In the meagre starlight, it was difficult to see much beyond the rippling water and the dark silhouettes of tree branches swaying in the breeze. A sizable pile of fish lay spread out on the grass behind him. Suddenly, an intense rustling sound broke the silence. The water's surface began to ripple faster, and a strong gust of wind whipped through the area. William's father, still in his trance-like state, simply stood up and walked away. His fishing pole dragged behind him, the line trailing from the lake through the dirt as he disappeared into the night. As the enthralled father vanished from view, the devil dragon came undulating through the trees downstream, William walking close by at the edge of the lake. The boy watched in awe as the beast approached the pile of fish and began to devour them, growling and grumbling as it fed. William made his way to his favorite fishing rock under the old tree, sitting down to observe the dragon as it continued its feast. After a moment, he spoke. "You can't go back into the water, can you?" The dragon looked up at William, fish parts falling from its open jaw as it let out a low grumble. But you want to go into the water again. Isn't that right? William continued, a hint of understanding in his voice. The dragon rose fully into the air, levitating as it locked eyes with the boy. William pointed to the lake, a wicked smile spreading across his face. I give you permission, he said, his voice filled with a new-found authority. Eat all the fish. Without hesitation, the devil dragon whipped its head toward the lake and soared into the center of the dark, fog-drenched water. As William kept watch, he retrieved his hidden fishing pole from a crevice in the back of the tree. Sitting back on the rock, William prepared his pole. This time, he took out a candle from his pocket, the sealing wax. As he struck a match to light it, the lake began to ripple and splash violently. Through breaks in the clouds and fog, moonlight revealed the dragon close to the water's surface, devouring whole schools of fish. William's first attempts to light the candle were thwarted by gusts of wind, each failed attempt increasing his urgency. Finally, the third match stayed lit. Working quickly, William dripped wax all over his fishing line. He grabbed a fish from the ground, stuffing the rest of the candle down its throat before attaching it to the hook. Standing up, William cast his line into the churning waters. The moment it hit the surface, an eerie stillness fell over the lake. William watched intently, sweat pouring down his face as he gripped the rod tightly. Suddenly, the devil dragon erupted from the water, attached to William's line and soaring straight up into the air. The force of its emergence nearly pulled William into the lake, but he caught his footing and began to reel in the devil. Gritting his teeth, William held on as the beast whipped its head back and forth. Then he changed tactics. He stopped reeling and let the line go slack. The devil dragon undulated and twirled around, dipping in and out of the water, swimming and flying in circles. When William's line went taut again, he was smiling. The devil dragon hovered at the very edge of the lake, still airborne, but now bound and tangled. The sealing wax-coated fishing line had pierced into the monster's red scales. William approached the edge of the lake, still smiling as he looked directly into the devil dragon's eyes. Slowly, the beast began to calm, its seething breaths returning to normal. As dawn broke over the foggy lake, the mist began to dissipate. Where once stood William and the fearsome devil dragon, now there were only a few young men fishing near William's usual spot. Their buckets held only a few fish each, and they shared a discouraged look, shaking their heads in disappointment. A strong gust of wind rustled through the trees, drawing their attention to the lake. Their jaws dropped in astonishment at the sight before them. There was William, riding atop what had once been the devil dragon. But the beast had transformed its scales now, a majestic, sparkly blue. Attached to its sides were huge nets full of fish, all bound with sealing wax. William's triumphant voice rang out across the water. Woohoo! As the other boys gaped at the spectacle, they were startled by a familiar cackle. The witch appeared beside them, clapping and dancing around in glee. The boy who caught the devil! The boy who caught the devil! The boy who caught the devil! She sang merrily, twirling between the astonished youths. Begone, witch! One of the boys shouted. The witch stopped her celebration, looking offended. I'm not a witch, she protested indignantly. I'm the Lady of the Lake, from King Arthur. You kids don't know that story. The pole was the sword. I'm not going to stand here and spoon-feed all this to you little brats. As the witch bickered with the bewildered boys, William continued to soar over the lake on his newly tamed dragon. His laughter echoed across the water, the sound of a boy having the time of his life, like a kid showing off on a magical jet ski. In that moment, as the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the transformed lake and the jubilant William, it became clear that this was more than just a tale of a boy who caught the devil. It was a story of growth, of facing one's fears, and of the transformative power of courage and wit over one's own self. William had not only tamed the beast, but had also grown into a young man capable of shouldering great responsibility. As William and his dragon swooped and soared over the sparkling water, the witch's words hung in the air, a reminder of the ancient tales and folklore that had shaped this modern adventure. The fishing pole that had started it all had indeed become a sword, a tool of power and destiny in the hands of a boy who dared to face the devil and emerged victorious